This on? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jerry Belair. I'm president of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. The coalition, I think our first year we had 22 member organizations. Our second year, last year, we had some 55 member organizations. We're now at 87 member organizations with tens of thousands of members. Julia handled a lot of these issues pretty well, so I know there's a lot of people that want to speak. I'm going to try to just move along with just a few points, and I'll give you written copies of written testimony. I want to thank Representative Regenberg and the other sponsors of House Bill 7199, which we support. Large capacity magazines are used in a majority of mass killings in the U.S. and limiting the number of rounds. There's a potential of limiting the number of victims. There's no legitimate need for over 10 rounds, none whatsoever. I've been a gun owner my whole life. I've never, I do have a gun that holds 10 rounds, a handgun that holds 10 rounds, but I can't imagine ever being in a position where, in order to protect myself and my home, I would ever need more than 10 rounds. My eyesight hasn't failed that much as yet. We know that we limit the number of rounds for duck hunting to preserve ducks from being overkilled. We know that we limit the number of rounds for deer hunting to keep deer from being overkilled. I think it makes a lot of sense to limit the number of rounds in civilian-owned guns to keep our citizens from being overkilled. So we would just ask that you support this bill. Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, our bordering states, and a couple of other states along the eastern seaboard, Maryland and New Jersey, all have 10-round capacity. New York had a 7-round, moved it to 10-round. After a court challenge, the Supreme Court has upheld 10-round capacity as being not violative of the Second Amendment. So it certainly would not be considered to be a violation of the Second Amendment. Two bills just quickly on domestic violence. 7575 we think is a good bill. We wish that it would include misdemeanor rather than just violent crimes that have an element of violence involved, cyber stalking and other types of misdemeanors. We do know that the Supreme Court does not consider it a violation of a person's Second Amendment rights when there's a commission of a misdemeanor that's not violent and they're required to surrender their guns or required to lose the right to the guns. In Castleman, U.S. v. Castleman, a case I think out of Tennessee, there was a 9-0 decision that it did not violate the defendant's rights to remove the gun from him for a nonviolent misdemeanor, and that was with Alioto and Thomas on the courts. So I think that that both bills that have been offered are good. I like 7575 because it also includes the restraining order language while the restraining order is active. The other bill does not. I would like to see that included, and I would like to see nonviolent misdemeanors included. And I only say that because we've worked closely with the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and they're one of our member organizations. And after long discussions with them, they are of the opinion that those particular elements are elements that are indicative of violent interactions occurring. I mean, that's just what they've seen here in this state. So we would certainly support their judgment in this particular reaction. Just quickly, 7853, we support it. That's straw sales. Straw sales are where somebody buys a gun on behalf of somebody who can't buy a gun. It wouldn't close the gun show loophole, because the gun show loophole is really non-licensed, non-federally licensed people under a collector's permit who are able to sell guns without a background check. So straw purchasing wouldn't even come into play there. Somebody could just walk up, not have to go through a background check to buy a gun from somebody who may have 20 guns on a table and call himself a collector. But in the straw purchase situation, already under federal law, dealers are not allowed to sell if they know it to be a straw purchase. So on the state level, I think the straw purchase law is a good idea. Obliterated serial numbers, I think, is a good law. I would certainly support that. Concealed carry in schools. We're an outlier. Rhode Island is an outlier by allowing concealed carry by anyone in its schools. Last year, 24 school committees, of the 24 school committees we went to, we couldn't get to all of them, signed resolutions in support of banning concealed carry in schools. There's no such thing as a mass shooter targeting a gun-free zone. They don't target gun-free zones. They target places that they have relationships with. A school that they may know, or a church they may know, or a workplace that they have, or somebody that's bothered them in a burger joint. They go back, and that's for the most part where mass shootings occur. There's a lot of heroic fantasies. I mean, if I had a gun on me and I was in a school and somebody walked in shooting a AR-15, I think most law enforcement would say that the worst thing that I could do is jump out in a live shooter situation with the kind of training that I'm required to have, which is shooting at a stationary target, to try and stop somebody in a theater situation, in a school situation, in that type of situation. Police officers are trained in live shooter situations over and over again. They're retrained months after month after month. This isn't a situation where you're shooting at a stationary target, and it's very likely, and law enforcement will agree, that it's not a good idea to have somebody in that particular situation. The likelihood, however, of there being an accident, if a janitor's got a gun, or if a lunch lady's got a gun, or if a guy a guy that's, you know, a school teacher. I mean, there was a school teacher. She shot herself in Utah in the bathroom. There was another school teacher in Colorado who was taking his gun in the parking lot and shot one of his students who he was going to give a ride home to. I mean, these are the things that will occur. And particularly in Rhode Island, where domestic violence offenders are allowed to have concealed carry firearms, you could actually be in a school committee meeting. You could be at a school hockey game. You could be on a school bus. You could be in a parent-teacher conference. And the person next to you could be a misdemeanor domestic violence offender with a gun with a large capacity clip in their magazine in their pocket. I mean, that's a possibility. We just don't need guns in schools. And, you know, I know there's a few people that say that, you know, if somebody had a gun, they would be able to stop a shooter. But, you know, we have 87 partner organizations. There are 24 school committees, hundreds of emails, letters, phone calls, petitions, representing over 100,000 Rhode Islanders that want you to pass this bill. The American Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals passed a resolution in support of this bill. The School Superintendents Association passed a resolution in support of this bill. The School Committee Association and the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns have all voted in favor of the resolution to pass this bill. We're bringing this resolution to town councils now again, to the school committees now again, and we'll do whatever we can to try and convince you that this is the right way to go. So anyway, we just urge you. It's a really, I think, important bill, and we just urge you to give it positive consideration and send it to the floor for a vote. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Belair. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Any questions? Representative Filippi.
I have a couple. Thank you for coming, sir.
Sure.
You had stated that you don't need a magazine, more than 10 rounds because you have good eyesight.
No.
And if someone came in your house, you would likely be able to neutralize the problem.
Right. I can't.
You don't need more rounds than 10.
I can't imagine ever needing more than 10 rounds to protect my home.
Understand. But then you said that if there was a live shooter situation in a school, that you couldn't do anything to make the live shooter situation stop. I just kind of see the contradiction there.
Well,
that you're so effective in your own home because your eyesight and your straight shot that you don't need.
I'm not saying I'll succeed.
Rounds.
I'm not saying that by the time I get 3 shots off, somebody hasn't shot me 5 times.
Sure.
But I'm saying that if I haven't stopped the threat in 10 rounds, I'm either dead or,
So if you were in Newtown with your firearm
right.
3 years ago, do you think you could have made a difference?
Do I think what?
You could have made a difference?
I doubt it very much. This guy came in blasting an AR-15 with 20-round clips, and the only thing that made a difference was when he had to change the clip because it jammed, and while he was changing it, several kids escaped.
It didn't also make a difference when the police showed up and he actually had an armed opponent. He shot himself at that point. That's when he took his own life, right? When it wasn't just him with a gun.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that me with a Luger, 10-round Luger, and him with an AR-15, the chances of my being successful. I mean, cops coming in with shooting with live power training, a lot of live fire training, right? These cops, hopefully, and many of them, right, against me, against an AR-15 and a Luger. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have much of a shot. I might shoot a couple of kids trying to get to them simply because I don't have the training, that these guys have. That's the danger, is that without the training, and law enforcement will tell you that, it's a problem. You ask law enforcement. They will tell you it's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I actually have a couple more brief questions. If I could.
Go right ahead, Representative.
You had stated that in the Alito Roberts decision that they said a nonviolent misdemeanor conviction. You said there was
Castleman. That's U.S. v. Castleman.
Castleman, when there was a nonviolent misdemeanor, that was sufficient to take away someone's right to keep and bear arms, correct?
Right.
So this bill does it for a non-criminal offense, the one by Representative Tanzi, correct? Where if it's a
misdemeanor, not a criminal, not a non-criminal.
If it's a domestic violence restraining order, if it's a civil restraining order, that's enough.
Which is what the federal government is too. As long as the federal government, the same law, it's under the Ludenberg Agreement, and I think it's 1994 and 1996. There were 2 amendments, Ludenberg amendments, that the gun is not allowed under an active restraining order once the restraining order expires.
Understand, and we're constricted not just by the Second Amendment in this state, right? We're constricted by Article 1, Section 22 of our state constitution, which doesn't have any of the regulation language as the Second Amendment. It just simply says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yeah.
So I guess my concern with your analysis is that maybe we're more restricted than the federal government in our ability to control firearms possession. And so just one of my legal concerns is that the domestic restraining order is a civil restraining order, and it's only a preponderance of the evidence standard. It's not a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. So like one of the things that I'm grappling with, and I know some other attorneys are would we run afoul of our state constitution, Article 1, Section 22, by taking away someone's firearms with a civil preponderance of the evidence standard?
I suppose I would be willing to put myself at risk as an attorney or as a elected official, to put myself at risk of being challenged in that regard in order to potentially protect somebody's life.